Continue with our Gemara. We're in Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph 113a of Sanhedrin. We're discussing, of course, the law of the Ir HaNidachas, the castaway city, the city that's been diverted and redirected from the service of Hashem to the service of idol worship. And we're almost at the last law with respect to property belonging to the city and whether or not it gets destroyed, as part of the law of destroying all that's in the city. We talked about yesterday the rebuilding of the city and whether it cannot be rebuilt at all and has to remain in desolation, or whether it can be made into gardens and vineyards but not to be rebuilt as a city as it was. We talked also about mezuzahs, how one opinion says that mezuzah saves the entire city, versus the other opinion which says that mezuzahs and the like will get buried, and various different objects and items belonging to the city and what happens to it. Now, in the context of orchards and vineyards in the city, first, as mentioned yesterday, in relation to whether or not you can make orchards and vineyards and gardens on the ruin of that city. Now we discussed a related element to that. So it's about a third from the top of the page, and it reads like this. First, the Gemara quotes the Mishnah, as always, in an Ivnis Avanasis Yiginis Pradasayim, quoted the opinion which said that you cannot rebuild the city. This was the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Right? Yeah, which said that you can rebuild it into gardens and orchards. Says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan, Mishnah Age text, that quotes the Mishnah Age text, as is often the case, as he pointed out. If the city had trees, presumably most cities have trees, so does it have to get destroyed along with the rest of the city as being property of the Ir HaNidachas? So says the Gemara, says this Mishnah Age text that the Gemara is quoting, Talushin, if those trees are detached from the ground, then asurin, they're forbidden, and they have to be destroyed with the rest of the city. Why? Because if it's detached from the ground, it qualifies as property of the town. And this verse says, all the property shall be gathered, placed in the center of town, in the chayva shal ir, in the thoroughfare of the town square, and there it should be burnt. So these trees are that property, gathered with the rest of the property, put it into the town square and burn it. But if it is still attached to the ground, it's permissible to leave it alone. Now, before we explain why that is, why is it that if a tree is still attached to the ground, it doesn't have to be destroyed along with the rest of the property? The Gemara, the Mishnah Age text, makes the following remark: Shel Ir HaNidachas, but there is a different city that's required to be destroyed. Bein Tulushin bein Mechubarim, whether the trees are attached to the ground, whether the trees are detached from the ground, also it's forbidden and must be destroyed. Some other city. Okay? So the Gemara is going to go on to explain what this other city is, but just to explain why it is that when it comes to an Ir HaNidachas, trees that are still attached to the ground do not have to be destroyed. And the reason is, it's something we mentioned earlier with respect to hair, that the verse states specifically, gather all the property, bring it to the center of town, to Rechayva, to this big street, to the square, and there it should be burnt. And therefore, only things that what is required is to gather it and bring it to the town square. If any other action is required, then it's precluded from that law. And therefore, in the case of trees that are still attached to the ground, there is something else required. You have to detach it from the ground, and then you can gather it and bring it to this town square. And because the verse doesn't say detach things, gather them and burn them, it only says gather them and then burn them, then anything that requires more than specifically just gathering it in is exempt from that law. And therefore, this tree which is attached to the ground, which requires more than just gathering it in, you got to chop it down and then gather it in, or uproot it and then bring it and then gather it in. Therefore, it's exempt from the law. Now the Gemara asks, and this basically ends the discussion on Ir HaNidachas. Now the Gemara diverts to a different discussion with respect to this other town, which the Mishnah said is another town that you're required by Jewish law to destroy it, and that in that town you'd have to destroy all trees, whether they're attached or detached to the ground. The Gemara is going to discuss that tree, and then that's going to take us to a discussion on Elijah the prophet, as we shall see. So my Ir HaNidachas, what's this other city that's required to be destroyed, in which, unlike the Ir HaNidachas, you would have to destroy even trees that are attached to the ground? So Amar Rav Chizda states, this is already the Gemara speaking, the Gemara's age, Tamaraic age, not the Mishnaic age. The Mishnaic text ends, and now it's the Gemara age analyzing that text. So Amar Rav Chizda said, Jerico, this is a reference to Jericho, the city of Jerico, the first city that Joshua and the Jewish people conquered, the first line of resistance against the Jewish people as they entered into the land of Israel after 40 years of wandering the desert under Joshua's leadership, and there miraculously the city is destroyed. And Diksiv, there the verse reads, this is in the book of Joshua, chapter 6, verse 17, Yeshua, Perek Vav, Pasuk Yitzayin, the Pasuk says, V'hoisa Ir Chedem, the Chedem Lashem, the city shall be laid waste for God. And thus, everything has to be destroyed. Because the verse goes on to say, V'chol asher ba, and everything that's in it. Everything that's in it includes even trees that are attached. Whereas with respect to the Ir HaNidachas, the verse doesn't say everything that's in it. The verse says, gather in its property and put it in the center of town. Now this tree that is attached to the ground requires not just to gather it in, but also to remove it from the earth. And therefore it's precluded from the law of destroying it if it were part of Ir HaNidachas. But when it comes to Jericho, where the verse says, Kol asher ba, everything that's in it, then therefore even a tree which is attached to the ground must be destroyed because it's part of everything that's in that city. Okay. Now, on the discussion of the city of Jericho, the Gemara tells us the following. Joshua swore at that time, this is a quote from the verse, Joshua chapter 6, verse 26. Lamar saying, Joshua swore saying as follows, Ara ish, cursed is the man, Lefnei Hashem before God, Asher Yakum, who will rise up, Ubana as Ir HaZos, and that will rebuild the city. Es Jericho, this city known as Jericho, Bevchoida Yisadena, with the death of his firstborn. This is the curse that Joshua is saying, that someone who's going to rebuild the city will do so with the death of his firstborn, and with the death of his youngest, Yatziv Delasah, he will affix its walls. So if someone dares to rebuild the city of Jericho, the city of Jericho, the curse of Yeshua is that God forbid he'll lose his firstborn and his youngest child. Now, Tanya, there's a Mishnaic age text which reads, that this prohibition of rebuilding the city of Jericho is twofold. Number one, Lo Yericho al Shema Ir HaNidachas. You cannot rebuild the city of Jericho and give it a different name, call it something else. V'lo Ir HaNidachas, and don't build some other city, al Shem Yericho, and call it Jericho. So the prohibition is A, to name cities Jericho, number one. Number two, to rebuild the city. So let's say you're rebuilding the city of Jericho itself, but you're calling it Montreal, that would be a violation. And let's say you're building Montreal and you called it Jericho, that would be a violation as well. So whether you're building a city in some other location, calling it Jericho, that's a violation of Yeshua's prohibition and therefore the curse. Or if you're building Jericho itself, but you're giving it a different name, that would also be in violation. How do we know that this prohibition goes like that? Because the verse reads like this. And this is the book of Kings, number 1. Kings 1, chapter 16, verse 34. After the description of Ahab's ascension to the throne, his marrying Jezebel, and how he violated God's command, and the verse goes on to describe the interactions with Elijah the prophet, etc. So the Gemara, the verse reads as follows. At that time, Bana Chiel, this person named Chiel, built Beis Eli, Chiel, which came from, he was known as the Beit Eli. I guess he came from Beit El or something like that. So this Chiel built Es Jericho, he built Jericho. Ba'aviram b'chayrai, Yasta, with the death of his firstborn Aviram, he founded it. With his Sigov, and with the death of his son Sigov Hatzira, his younger son, Hitziv Delasa, he built the walls. So the curse of Yeshua actually was fulfilled in that Chiel built, during the time of Ahab, he rebuilt the city of Jericho. Now the Gemara points out, it doesn't say so explicitly, but Rashi explains it for us, that the verse says Es Jericho, the Jericho. The word Es is hard to translate it, but it's kind of translated as like a semicolon, and the word Es sometimes comes to break up and change like an inflection within the verse. And in this case, the word Es comes to tell us that he didn't actually build Jericho, but he built some other city, giving it the name Jericho. And thus, and even with him, even though he didn't build the city of Jericho, he built some other city with the name of Jericho, nonetheless, the curse of Joshua happened to him. When he founded it, his oldest son died, and when he put the walls in, his youngest son died. Now, Tanya, we have a Mishnah, a text which explains more about this story. And it says like this: Ba'avidam b'chorai, with the death of his firstborn Avidam, Rasha lo haya le'ilmod. This wicked one, or Ba'avidam b'chorai Rasha, with the Avidam, his oldest wicked son, lo haya le'ilmod, he didn't have to learn anything. The father, Chiel, shouldn't have learned anything. But B'sigav Tziroi, but with Sigav, his younger son, haya le'ilmod, he should have learned. It's kind of a cryptic statement. What's going on? So the Gemara asks, first of all, Avidam V'Sigav, these two boys, Avidam V'Sigav, the oldest son and youngest son of Chiel, my Ovid, what did they do? And we're referring to them as wicked. Number one. Number two, my Ka'amar. What does the Mishnah mean to say here? That he should have learned from his oldest, didn't learn from the other? What's going on here? So Hachikam, this is what it means to say, says the Gemara. The Gemara answers the second question first. Avidam B'Chayrai, with the death of his oldest son, he should have learned. This wicked one, the father Chiel, should have learned that his youngest son will also die. From the fact that his oldest son died at the time of founding of the city of what he was rebuilding and naming Jericho, he should have realized that the curse of Joshua was being fulfilled, and therefore he should have stopped and not got up to the point where he's putting up his walls, putting up the doors, and then his youngest son would die. So after the death of his oldest son, he should have learned and stopped. But he didn't. He continued, and his youngest son died as well. Now the Gemara adds as follows: from the fact that the verse states that Avidam was the oldest one, is it not self-explanatory that Sigav is the youngest one? Why does the verse have to explicitly state Avidam the oldest one, Sigav the youngest one? It could have just said Avidam the oldest one, and then Sigav, his son, and I would have understood that it's a younger one, because when you tell me there's an oldest, anybody else is going to be younger. Why does the verse have to explicitly state that it was Sigav, the youngest one? So Malamba, this teaches us that there were children in between. He says oldest and then youngest, not oldest and then the other son. That would mean there's only two, oldest and the youngest, oldest and the other one. But from the fact that it says oldest and then youngest, means there's others in the middle. And therefore, as he was building successively, each of his children were dying until his youngest son died. So imagine the intense wickedness of this guy, that even if his oldest son's dying, he keeps on building. His second son dies, he keeps on building, and so on and so forth. He's still building the city, and his children are slowly dying until finally his oldest to his youngest, not oldest and youngest, but oldest to his youngest child died. The intensity of this commitment to this evil. Gemara tells us the following very interesting exchange that occurred at the time. Ahab, the king Ahab, Sheshvina Hava, was a friend of Chiel, this person who built the city and lost his sons as a result. They were friends. Sheshvina also implies some sort of like, not marital relations as in they married each other, but it could be maybe their children married each other, or maybe they were like a groomsman. They were like very close friends. They were even family related, even if not blood related, or through marriage related somehow. That could be implied in the word Sheshvina as well. Like, for example, Sheshvina is usually reserved to describe the people who walk the bride and groom down the aisle. So they are called Sheshvinin in that their children are marrying each other. So Sheshvinin has a kind of, what we would call it today in modern terms, mechutanim, they're related through marriage, even if they're not actually blood related. Not like brother-in-law and sister, not brother-in-law, but related as in their children are married to each other, or siblings are married to each other, something like that. Anyway, they're close friends, bottom line. King Ahab and this Chiel. Now, Asa Iyu, so he, King Ahab, Ve'elio, and came, the Mishal Bashlema, to see how he's doing. Imagine that. Here's an evil guy, failing to do God's word, keeps on building the city even as his children are dying, and Elijah the prophet comes to console him, to comfort him. Isn't that amazing? The fact that Ahab himself was a wicked king, so he came to visit his wicked friend. Okay, I got it. But Elijah the prophet comes too. That teaches you something. Even someone who, by your account, is a terrible person, he's suffering, comfort. It's amazing. So Leo and Ahab go to inquire after Chiel when he's sitting Shiva, he's mourning for the loss of his children. Beit Taima, in the house of the mourning. So Yosef Kamar, So Chiel, the father who's mourning the loss of his children, is sitting there and saying, and now he's realizing why he lost his sons. And he says, Dilma Kimalit Yeshua, maybe when Joshua made that curse about losing your children when you build the city of Jericho, Hachilat, this is the intention of his curse. Not to rebuild Jericho and give it a different name. And don't build some other city, Al Shem Jericho, with the name of Jericho, which is what he was doing. He wasn't building Jericho itself. He was building a different city and giving it the name Jericho. So now that he's sitting Shiva, he's mourning the loss of all of his children. He's saying, maybe when Yeshua gave that curse, it wasn't specifically about building the city of Jericho again, but it was actually about building another city with the name of Jericho. And that's why I'm sitting here. So Amalei Elio says, indeed. That's you're learning their story correctly. You're learning the curse correctly, and this is what's happening to you. Amalei, so Chiel said, I don't get it. Why is the curse of Yeshua happening to me? Hashta lotus of the Moshe, loika makaima, the curses of Moshe Rabbeinu are not being fulfilled. The Ksiv, as the verse reads, v'asaitem v'abadotem. The verse describes Moshe Rabbeinu says, this is in Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 11, verse 16, and then later the next verse is going to be chapter 11, verse 17. So the two verses that follow each other. You're going to stray from the ways of serving God and serve other foreign gods. The Ksiv in the verse continues to say, and God will be angry at you. Shemaim will close up the heavens, and there won't be any rain. So Moshe Rabbeinu's curse is that if you worship idols, there's not going to be any rain. So continues Chiel and says, Vahu Gavra, that person referring to himself, he put up idol worship. I'll call tilim v'tilim on every single mount he can possibly find. So my life is, saturated with idol worship. And the rains are not stopping to fall, to the point the Mezel Miskad, I can't even walk to my idols to serve them because of how much rain is coming down from the heavens. So the curse of Moshe is not happening. Moses said that if you worship idols, cursed with no rain, and here I am building idols left, right, and center. And the rain is saturating the world so much that I can't even walk to worship my idols. So therefore, continues Chiel, Latusa de Yeshua Tamid de Yukaima. Is the curse of Joshua going to be fulfilled? So I figured it was nothing. This whole curses business from the Torah is a waste of time, because here I am worshiping idols and I'm not getting cursed. The rain is pouring. So what, am I supposed to believe that Joshua, the student of Moshe Rabbeinu, his curse is going to happen? So I built the city with the name of Jericho. So Miyad, right away, Eliyahu put a stop to this. And the Gemara now quotes the verse in Malachim number 1, chapter 17, verse 1, which comes right after the description of Chiel building Jericho and losing his children. The verse reads, Eliyahu said, Eliyahu the Tishbi said, Mitayshve Gilad, from the people of Gilad, description of Eliyahu coming from Tishbi and from Gilad, like the same song, Eliyahu Navi, Eliyahu Tishbi. He says, Chai Hashem Malakei Yisrael, by the life of God of Israel. In Miyah Talamater Gomer, there will be no rain in my life. Boy Rachme, indeed, asked for mercy, prayed, Vahavulei Ikla de Mitra, and asked that the key for rain be given to him. And so it was. But come Va'azal, and he went up, and he left Chiel's house. This is the end of the story. The Gemara is going to continue with more discussion of Eliyahu and Ahab later. But I want to comment on the following. Eliyahu asked that the curse of Moshe be fulfilled. Was the curse of Moshe not enough? Why did Eliyahu have to do that? So it would seem to me as follows. Reward and punishment are not punitive, God forbid. It's not as if God wants to punish. But rather, they're ways of encouraging us to do what we're supposed to. Now, when it came to building Jericho, he was losing his children as per the curse, and as the Gemara noted, he should have learned that as soon as his first son died, he should have learned to stop. But he continued. Now, with respect to the rain, Chiel describes the rain as coming down so much that it stopped him from walking to idol worship. It's almost as if God is saying, look, I don't want to do the negative to you. I'm going to try to find a positive way to stop you from worshiping idols. And if it means to give you so much blessings that you can't even make it to your idol worship, then they'll do that way. But if you're not getting the message that way, Eliyahu Navi says, look, we have to go the other route. God forbid. And therefore the lesson we take away from this is, we have to think of everything that happens in our life, both the positive and the negative, as messages and encouragements to move us in the right direction. And the quicker we get the message, the quicker we can move on, as it were, from our lives. Had Chiel got the message of the rain falling so much, it's stopping from going to idol worship, that God doesn't want to serve idols, then the rain would have returned to its normal way of following as a blessing. But because he didn't get the message, and he clearly said so, he tells Eliyahu, look, I think the curse is a waste. Proof, the rain's still following. Eliyahu says, okay, we got to switch course and make the curse stick. And he did, and the rain stopped. So have a wonderful day. It's nice outside. Go out and make sure you drink a lot of water. Have a wonderful day.